My sister called me out of the blue to uninvite me to her wedding, smirking, as she called me a lowly cleaner. Then my mother leaned into the frame, casually mentioning they told the groom's wealthy family I had died of cancer 5 years ago. They told me to just stay dead and disappear. I hung up, wiped my eyes, and looked down at the $350,000 venue contract sitting on my custom mahogany desk. They had no idea I actually owned the very estate where they planned to get married. My name is Olivia. I am 33 years old, and my family threw me away because they thought I scrubbed toilets for a living. Before I share the rest of my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic relatives to protect your own peace. The video call came at exactly 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I was standing by the windows of my penthouse office in Chicago, reviewing financial reports when Brittany's name flashed across my screen. My younger sister Brittany rarely reached out unless she needed money or wanted to brag. I accepted the video call expecting another demand. Instead, I was met with her perfectly contoured face and a smug, calculated smile. She was sitting in a bridal boutique holding a glass of champagne. "Please do not come to my wedding, Olivia," she said without even a basic greeting. Her tone was light, almost conversational, as if she were discussing the weather rather than banning her sister from her wedding. I blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Why would you say that?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully steady. Brittany let out a sharp, condescending laugh. She flipped her perfectly highlighted blonde hair over her shoulder and leaned closer to her phone camera to show off her massive diamond engagement ring. "Because Donovan's family is old money, Olivia. They are a prominent and extremely wealthy medical family from Atlanta. I simply do not want his high society relatives to know that my older sister scrubs toilets for a living. It would be a complete humiliation for me to introduce a janitor to a federal judge and a neurosurgeon." I opened my mouth to defend the commercial facility management company I had built from the ground up. I wanted to tell her I did not just clean buildings, I owned the contracts for half the corporate towers in the Midwest. Before a single word could even leave my lips, the camera violently jerked to the side. My mother Brenda shoved her way into the frame. Her face was flushed with annoyance, and her eyes held that familiar icy glare I had known since childhood. "Listen to your sister," Brenda snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "Do not embarrass us like you did when you chose to be a glorified maid instead of going to medical school. You made your choice 10 years ago when you walked out of university." I stared at the screen, old wounds aching with fresh intensity. "You know perfectly well why I could not finish my degree." "Mom," I said, fighting to keep my composure. "Dad emptied my entire college savings account, taking every penny I had earned working night shifts." My mother waved her manicured hand, completely unbothered by the truth. "Your father needed that money to buy Brittany a sports car for her 20th birthday to maintain a certain image to attract a successful husband. You were already obsessed with your little cleaning business. A cleaner does not need a degree, Olivia. It was a practical financial decision." Her sheer callousness took my breath away. They had stolen my future to fund my sister's lifestyle, and still believed they were entirely in the right. Brenda was not finished. She leaned into the camera until her face filled the screen. "We have already handled the situation with Donovan's family. We told them our eldest daughter tragically passed away from bone cancer 5 years ago." My heart stopped. "You told your future son-in-law that I am dead," I whispered, her words hitting me like a physical blow. "It was the easiest way to explain your absence without ruining Brittany's reputation," my mother stated. "So do us all a favor and stay dead. Never contact us again." When I tried calling back, an automated message informed me the number was no longer in service. My own mother had just blocked me, declaring me deceased to preserve my sister's fake high society image. I stood frozen in the center of my spacious office, the silence ringing in my ears. A single tear escaped, sliding down my cheek, but I quickly brushed it away. I had spent my entire 20s crying over their rejection, begging for scraps of their approval. I was not going to waste my 30s doing the same. I walked back to my custom-built mahogany desk and pressed the button on my intercom system. Carter, I said, my voice projecting absolute authority. Bring me the venue contract for the Donovan and Williams wedding immediately. Less than a minute later, my vice president of legal affairs walked into my office and placed a thick, leather-bound folder on my desk. I opened it and looked down at the master contract. The venue fee was listed at $350,000 for full exclusive access to the Astor estate next month. Brittany thought she was marrying into wealth at the most prestigious exclusive luxury mansion in the state. What she and my parents did not know was that my corporation, Apex Facility Holdings, had just finalized the purchase of the Astor estate exactly 10 days ago. I picked up my gold pen and traced the signature line at the bottom of the page. The signature approving their lavish wedding venue belonged to me, the dead janitor's sister. Carter tapped his pen against the venue agreement, placing a secondary document next to it. Look closely at the billing structure, Carter said. The Astor estate package caps at $150,000, but the invoice submitted to the groom's family is for $350,000. I scanned the itemized list. The vendor of record was an entity called Golden Events Limited. I recognized the registered business address immediately. It was my parents' suburban home. Brittany had deliberately set up a shell company to act as a middleman. She is acting as her own wedding planner, I noted. She is charging her future in-laws an exorbitant premium and pocketing a $200,000 difference. Carter crossed his arms. It gets much worse. The payment instructions require the funds to be wired directly into a corporate account held by your father. Greg is using his failing construction company as the holding account to bail themselves out of bankruptcy. I leaned back, processing the sheer audacity. They were not just content with telling a neurosurgeon I had died of bone cancer, they were actively executing a massive financial scam against a sitting federal judge. Crossing into federal wire fraud was a new low. Do we terminate the contract right now? Carter asked. I can have our legal team freeze the transaction and lock them out by the close of business today. I stared at the signature. Terminating the contract would be too easy. It would allow them to spin a false narrative of victimhood. I needed to see exactly how deep this deception went first. No, I said with certainty. Leave the contract active for now. I want to conduct a physical audit of the property myself. Carter looked at me with mild confusion. You want to audit the Astor estate personally? We have a dedicated team of 60 regional property managers who can handle that. I need to see the venue through the eyes of the people my family despises, I replied. I walked over to the executive storage closet. Apex Facility Holdings employed thousands of maintenance workers. I always kept standard issue uniforms on hand. I pulled out navy blue coveralls bearing the embroidered Apex logo. I swapped my designer's suit for the cotton uniform. I strapped a tool belt around my waist, loaded it with a steel wrench, a flashlight, and a digital diagnostic meter. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun and grabbed a clipboard. Carter watched me transform from a chief executive into a blue-collar maintenance worker in under 3 minutes. You are going undercover at your own luxury property, he stated, a slow smile spreading across his face. I am simply going to make sure our HVAC systems are running perfectly for the upcoming wedding season. I replied smoothly, grabbing my keys. I took the private elevator down to the underground parking garage and bypassed my usual luxury sedan, opting instead for one of our unmarked company fleet vehicles. The drive to the Astor estate took exactly 40 minutes, giving me plenty of quiet time to mentally prepare. The estate was a sprawling, breathtaking property featuring perfectly manicured botanical gardens, towering white marble columns, and a grand ballroom. I pulled my plain truck around to the service entrance, completely bypassing the ornate main gates. The local property manager, David, met me at the concrete loading dock. His eyes widened slightly as he took in my uniform. Ms. Williams? He started, extending his hand nervously. We did not expect the corporate owner to be doing the ductwork inspection personally today. For today, I am just Olivia from maintenance, I told him firmly. Do not announce my presence to the estate staff. I need to check the airflow circulation in the grand ballroom. We have a highly sensitive event booked for next month, and I want absolutely zero operational failures on our end. David nodded quickly and handed me the master keycard. I made my way through the quiet labyrinth of service corridors, a hidden world my mother and sister considered entirely beneath them. I finally pushed through the discreet service doors and stepped directly into the grand ballroom. The space was magnificent with towering floor-to-ceiling windows, letting in streams of bright afternoon sunlight that caught the massive crystal chandeliers overhead. I knelt carefully by the wooden baseboards, using my heavy wrench to unscrew the brass ventilation grates. I was genuinely checking the interior filter alignment when the sound of approaching footsteps echoed loudly through the cavernous room. I quickly checked my digital watch. The ballroom was supposed to be completely empty for the next hour. I gripped my steel wrench tightly and began to slide out from the recessed ventilation shaft, intending to alert the unauthorized intruders that the area was strictly closed for active maintenance. The massive solid oak doors at the front of the ballroom swung open with a heavy, echoing thud. The natural, pristine acoustics of the room perfectly amplified the deep, resonant voice of a man speaking with quiet but absolute authority. "It is a beautiful venue, Mother. Brittany assured me the event coordinators have everything handled perfectly, and the final payment clears today." I froze instantly in place, remaining half hidden behind a towering marble pillar. I recognized that distinct voice from the background of Brittany's social media videos. It was Donovan, the brilliant neurosurgeon my sister had managed to snare in her web of lies. A sharp, commanding female voice replied, her expensive heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. "I certainly hope so, Donovan. For $350,000, I expect absolute perfection. Though I must admit, I find your fiancé's financial arrangements unusual for a standard wedding planner." I held my breath, clutching the cold metal of my wrench as my heart pounded in my chest. Walking directly toward my position were Donovan and his mother, Federal Judge Yvonne. I held my breath as the massive oak doors clicked shut behind them. Donovan stood tall and composed, looking around the grand ballroom with quiet appreciation. Beside him was Judge Yvonne. Even in a casual trench coat, she radiated an intimidating authority that commanded immediate respect. I remained perfectly still near the recessed wall, watching them admire the architecture. Yvonne stepped toward the large brass ventilation grates that bordered the dance floor. She reached up to adjust the lapel of her coat. A sharp metallic clink sliced through the quiet room. Yvonne gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Her vintage diamond brooch, a priceless family heirloom, had slipped from the thick fabric. It bounced once on the polished wood and dropped straight through the wide gaps of the antique brass grate, vanishing into the dark ventilation shaft below. Donovan immediately dropped to his knees, shining his phone flashlight down into the narrow gap. "I cannot reach it," he muttered, his voice tight with concern. "It is lodged on a crossbeam about 4 feet down." David, the estate manager, came sprinting across the ballroom, his face pale with panic. When he saw the federal judge looking distressed, he began sweating profusely. "Oh my goodness, Your Honor, I am so incredibly sorry," David stammered. "We will get it back immediately. I will have to call a specialized heritage contractor. These grates are bolted into the original hardwood. If we try to pry them up forcefully, we could cause permanent structural damage to the floorboards. It might take a few hours to get a team out here." Yvonne frowned, clearly displeased by the frantic reaction. "I do not have a few hours to wait for a contractor, David. That brooch belonged to my great-grandmother." I wiped my hands on a clean cloth from my tool belt and stepped out from the shadows of the pillar. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice cutting through David's frantic apologies with cool precision. "I can retrieve that for you right now." David spun around, his eyes wide with horror, as he took in my navy blue Apex Facility Holdings uniform. "What are you doing?" he hissed under his breath, trying to physically block me from approaching the wealthy clients. "You are just a maintenance worker. Go back to the service corridors. I will handle this. I ignored his protests completely and stepped around him. I knelt beside the brass grate, assessing the situation in a single glance. The grate was secured by specialized tamper-proof star head screws designed specifically to keep unauthorized people out. I reached into my leather tool belt, pulled out my electric screwdriver, and snapped the exact matching star bit into place. In 4 fluid motions, I removed the screws and lifted the heavy brass plate, setting it gently on a protective cloth to avoid scratching the floor. Next, I pulled a telescoping magnetic retrieval wand with a micro LED light from my belt. I extended the metal rod carefully, snaking it down the narrow, dusty shaft. I guided it past the jagged metal crossbeams until the light caught the brilliant sparkle of the diamonds. A soft click echoed as the strong magnet connected firmly with the metal clasp of the brooch. I smoothly pulled the wand back up, retrieving the heirloom perfectly intact. I wiped it clean with a fresh microfiber cloth and handed it directly to Yvonne. The entire process took less than 30 seconds and the historic floor remained completely unharmed. Yvonne took the brooch from my palm. She did not immediately pin it back on her coat. Instead, she subjected me to a piercing, calculated gaze. Her sharp eyes scanned my practical uniform, my steady hands, and my completely unfazed expression. "Thank you," Yvonne said, her tone shifting from frustrated to genuinely impressed. "Most people would have panicked in this situation, or worse, brought out a crowbar and caused a tremendous amount of property damage. You have a remarkably steady head on your shoulders." I nodded respectfully, maintaining direct eye contact. "A problem is simply a puzzle waiting for the right tool, Your Honor." Yvonne raised an elegant eyebrow at my use of her correct title. Donovan smiled warmly, clearly appreciative of the seamless resolution to what could have been a disaster. Yvonne dismissed the still sweating estate manager with a single sharp wave of her hand, focusing her entire attention entirely on me. "I have a deep respect for blue-collar hard work," Yvonne stated, her voice carrying a heavy, deliberate weight. "It builds character and requires a level of practical hands-on intelligence that you rarely ever see in corporate boardrooms anymore." She paused, her expression growing slightly colder as she looked around the lavish, excessively expensive ballroom. "It is a stark contrast to the company my son is currently keeping. My future daughter-in-law claims to be a high-end luxury event planner, yet she lacks the most basic understanding of transparent accounting. She projects an image of immense wealth, but my instincts tell me she is hiding severe financial desperation. She insists on this ridiculous overpriced spectacle, yet bright red flags have been appearing in every single vendor contract she submits to my financial advisors." I listened intently, keeping my face a perfectly neutral mask. Inside, my mind was racing. Yvonne was brilliant. She already suspected Brittany was running a scam. The federal judge's instincts were razor sharp, and my sister was playing a very dangerous game with the wrong family. Yvonne gave me one last appreciative nod, pinning the diamond brooch securely back onto her coat lapel. "It is incredibly refreshing to meet someone who actually earns an honest living for a change. Keep up the excellent work." Donovan thanked me as well, offering a polite nod before escorting his mother toward the side exit that led out to the botanical gardens. I watched them walk away, a small, knowing smile touching my lips. I turned back to the floor, fitting the brass grate into place and securing the screws. Just as the heavy side door clicked shut behind the judge, the main ballroom doors swung open again with a loud, aggressive crash. Shrill, complaining voices immediately echoed across the vast room. Brenda and Brittany strutted into the ballroom for their scheduled dress rehearsal. They were carrying massive binders of fabric swatches and glossy bridal magazines, loudly berating the parking valets to anyone who would listen. They marched, looking entitled and arrogant, right toward the direct center of the beautifully polished wooden dance floor. Suddenly, Brittany stopped dead in her tracks. Her expensive bridal magazines slipped from her grasp, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Her eyes had locked onto the woman kneeling by the ventilation grate in a navy blue maintenance uniform. The blood quickly drained entirely from Brittany's face, leaving her pale and shaking. Brenda gasped sharply, instantly dropping her fake designer handbag onto the ground. The two shocked women froze in absolute paralyzed horror as they stared directly at me. Brittany's jaw unhinged. The glossy bridal magazine slipped from her fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a deafening smack. For a split second, the grand ballroom was entirely silent. Then the panic on my sister's face twisted into violent rage. She did not care that we were standing in a luxury venue or that event coordinators were just outside. She stormed across the dance floor, her designer heels clicking furiously against the wood like rapid gunfire. Before I could stand up from the grate, Brittany's manicured fingers clamped down on my forearm like a vice. Her acrylic nails dug directly into my skin through the thick cotton of my uniform. "Get up," she hissed, her voice a frantic whisper reeking of desperation. She yanked me forward with surprising strength fueled by panic. "What are you doing here? Are you stalking me?" I easily had the physical leverage to break her grip, but I let her pull me. I wanted to see how far she would take this delusion. She dragged me away from the grand windows and shoved me through a heavy wooden door tucked behind the main staircase. It was a supply closet smelling strongly of industrial floor wax and bleached linens. She slammed the door shut behind us, plunging us into the harsh light of a single overhead bulb. "You are absolutely pathetic, Olivia." Brittany spat, her chest heaving as she backed me against a stack of metal folding chairs. "I told you to stay away from me. I told you to stay dead to Donovan's family. And what do? You find out where my dress rehearsal is and show up in your disgusting janitor outfit to ruin my life." I adjusted my heavy leather tool belt completely unfazed. "I am conducting a routine inspection of the HVAC system," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly flat. "This is a working commercial estate, Brittany. People are employed here to keep the lights on and the air cold. I am simply one of them." Brittany let out a sharp, hysterical laugh that echoed off the cramped walls. She frantically unclasped her expensive fake designer purse. "You tracked down my luxury venue just to beg for a handout. You are completely obsessed with me. You want Donovan to see you scrubbing floors so he will feel sorry for you and give you money. Well, it is not going to work. His family does not associate with the lower class." She reached into her wallet and pulled out a wad of crisp bills. She shoved the money aggressively into my chest. 5 $100 bills fluttered against the fabric of my coveralls before drifting down to rest on a folding chair. "Take this and get out the back door right now," she commanded, her voice shaking with adrenaline. $500. Do not ever say I do not take care of you. Now take your tool belt and vanish before I call estate security to have you physically removed for trespassing. Before I could process the absolute irony of her threatening to call my own security team on me, the utility closet door violently swung open. The hallway light spilled over us. My mother Brenda stood in the doorway. Her face was a mask of pure, unfiltered hatred. She stepped into the cramped closet and closed the door behind her, trapping the three of us in the suffocating space. "I should have known you would pull a stunt like this," Brenda snarled. Her eyes raked over my uniform with absolute disgust, lingering on the heavy diagnostic wrench strapped to my waist. "You simply cannot stand to see your sister succeed. You always wanted to destroy Brittany because you are bitterly jealous. She is marrying a brilliant neurosurgeon from a billionaire family, and you are playing with wrenches in a basement like a common laborer." I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. There was no maternal warmth in her gaze, only a frantic need to protect her golden child's fraudulent image. "I did not track her down, Mom," I said, keeping my tone deadly calm. "I am working. This is my assigned location for the day." Brenda stepped closer, raising a finger and pointing it directly in my face. Her expensive perfume was suffocating. "Do not play games with me, Olivia. We know exactly what you are trying to do. You want to sabotage this wedding because you have absolutely nothing. But I will not allow you to drag us down to your miserable financial level. If you step foot anywhere near Donovan, or if you attempt to ruin this wedding in any capacity, I will personally sue you for harassment. I will hire the most vicious lawyers in Chicago, and I will destroy what little life you have left. I will take your pathetic cleaning business and run it into the ground until you are homeless." My heart beat at a steady, controlled rhythm. They were practically handing me the rope to hang them with. I casually crossed my arms, bringing my left wrist close to my chest. With a subtle, practiced tap of my index finger, I activated the hidden recording application on my smartwatch. A tiny, invisible vibration against my pulse confirmed the device was now capturing every single word echoing in the utility closet. "You would sue your own daughter?" I asked, projecting a fake tone of vulnerability to encourage her toxic tirade. Brenda sneered, leaning in close. "You are not my daughter. You stopped being my daughter the day you refused to support this family's ambitions. Brittany is my priority now. She is securing our financial future. So take that dirty money she just gave you, walk out the service exit, and never show your face near my family again." They stood there panting, fully believing they had just put the impoverished sister firmly in her place. They truly thought $500 and a baseless legal threat were enough to make me scurry away into the shadows. I looked down at the crisp bills resting on the metal chair. Slowly, I reached down and picked up the cash. I smoothed the edges of the money with agonizing precision, taking my time. Brittany let out a loud sigh of relief, clearly assuming I had accepted the bribe. "You see," Brittany said, turning to Brenda with a victorious, arrogant smirk. "She just needed cash. She is so predictable." I folded the $500 and slid it neatly into the front pocket of my maintenance coveralls. I looked up and met my sister's eyes. I offered her a bright, completely serene smile. "Have a beautiful wedding, Brittany," I said. I stepped around them, pushed open the utility closet door, and walked out into the bright service corridor without looking back. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, my serene smile vanished. My posture shifted instantly from a subservient worker back to a commanding chief executive. I pulled my secure, encrypted smartphone from my belt. I opened my direct messaging channel to Carter. I did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. I typed out the message with rapid, forceful strikes of my thumb. "Audit Brittany's LLC immediately. Do a full forensic sweep of the payment gateway. I smell federal wire fraud." The drive back to the Apex Facility Holdings headquarters took less than 40 minutes, but my mind raced faster than the downtown traffic. I bypassed my penthouse suite and walked directly into the secure Financial Operations Center on the 50th floor, not even bothering to change out of my navy blue maintenance coveralls. Carter was already standing in the center of the room, flanked by two of our top forensic accountants. The massive digital screens that usually displayed our regional property acquisitions were now entirely populated with the financial filings of Golden Events Limited. Carter adjusted his glasses as I approached the main conference table, sliding a thick red tabbed dossier toward me. "You have an exceptionally good nose for white-collar crime, Olivia," he said, his voice completely devoid of its usual corporate warmth. "We initiated a deep dive into the LLC the moment you sent that text. The paperwork is a masterclass in audacity." I pulled up a chair, resting my elbows on the polished glass table. "Show me the numbers, Carter. I want to see exactly how greedy my sister has become." He tapped a command on his tablet, and the primary monitor illuminated with two side-by-side invoices. On the left is the standard master contract for the Astor Estate, Carter explained, pointing his laser pen at the screen, "for a premium weekend booking including full property buyout luxury catering for 300 guests, and the Platinum Staff Package, our venue charges exactly $150,000. This is the contract Golden Events Limited signed with us." I nodded, tracking the math. "And the invoice on the right. That is the invoice Golden Events Limited submitted to the groom's family for payment." Carter said, his jaw tightening. Brittany billed Donovan's mother an astronomical $350,000 for the exact same package. I stared at the digital display, my eyes scanning the heavily doctored, itemized list. Brittany had not simply padded a few line items to cover standard wedding planner margins. She had fabricated entirely fictitious services, slapping massive price tags on non-existent amenities. There was a $40,000 charge for international floral importation logistics, a service the Astor Estate explicitly included in the base package. There was another $50,000 line item for secondary structural insurance, a completely fake requirement she invented to drain more funds from Donovan's family. She is intentionally overcharging her future in-laws by $200,000, I stated, my voice echoing in the quiet room. She is using a shell company to act as a vendor, inflating the true cost of our property and pocketing the massive difference. The sheer brazenness of the scam was staggering. Brittany was not merely acting like a spoiled bride demanding a lavish wedding. She was running a highly coordinated financial extraction operation on her fiancé's family. I looked back at Carter, my mind calculating the legal implications. Donovan's mother is not just a wealthy matriarch, I reminded him. Yvonne is a sitting federal judge. If she wires that money, Brittany is committing a major felony. Carter grimaced, sliding another document across the table. It gets significantly worse. We trace the banking architecture connected to Golden Events Limited. The LLC is not just registered to your sister. I picked up the banking schematic. The primary receiving account for the $350,000 wire transfer did not belong to Brittany alone. The account was jointly held by Greg Wilson, my father. I flipped to the next page, which contained a rapid background check our analysts had pulled on Greg's corporate holdings. Wilson Construction, the company my father had proudly paraded around our neighborhood for decades, was in catastrophic financial ruin. They are facing imminent bankruptcy, Carter explained, highlighting a series of aggressive creditor liens filed against Greg's business over the last 90 days. He has overdrawn his primary operating accounts, and the suppliers are threatening to seize his remaining heavy equipment. They are completely underwater. I stared at the red numbers bleeding across the page. The truth clicked into place with sickening clarity. This was never just about Brittany wanting a fairy tale wedding to boost her fake influencer image. This was a desperate, coordinated family bailout. My parents had enabled Brittany's shallow lifestyle for years, and now they were using her marriage as a lucrative payday. But the greed did not stop with my father. Look at the secondary disbursements I ordered, pointing to a series of automated transfers set up on the LLC's account. Carter nodded grimly. Your sister has $60,000 in secret, high-interest credit card debt. The moment the groom's family wires the $350,000, the system is programmed to immediately route $200,000 to your father's failing business to stop the asset seizure, while $60,000 goes directly to American Express to cover Brittany's maxed-out cards. The wedding is essentially a front to siphon wealth from an old money family to save a bankrupt one. My stomach turned as the full scope of their criminal intent settled over me. My mother had just threatened to sue me for harassment to protect this exact scheme. They actually believed they were untouchable, hiding behind the pristine reputation of a neurosurgeon and a federal judge. They were treating Donovan's family like a personal bottomless ATM, ready to bleed them dry and discard their trust. I slowly closed the red dossier, my initial shock dissolving into cold, unwavering resolve. Brittany was not just a toxic, entitled bridezilla anymore. She was an active liability, and she was attempting to use my newly acquired property to facilitate a federal crime. I looked directly at Carter, my voice dropping to a hard, commanding register. Initiate a corporate anti-money laundering hold on the venue contract immediately. Freeze the payment gateway for Golden Events Limited. Carter's eyes lit up with predatory corporate efficiency as he reached for his keyboard. Consider it locked. Carter did not waste a single second. Sitting in the secure financial operations center of Apex Facility Holdings on the 50th floor, he immediately executed my directive. Our proprietary payment gateway was specifically designed to handle hundreds of millions of dollars in commercial real estate transactions across the country, making it incredibly sensitive to financial irregularities. Carter engaged the maximum corporate compliance protocol, specifically targeting the master invoice submitted by Golden Events Limited. He flagged the routing numbers, cross-referenced the mismatched tax identification details, and initiated a hard, unyielding blockade on the pending $350,000 transfer. The trap was set with absolute digital precision, leveraging strict federal banking regulations to squeeze my sister into a corner she could not manipulate her way out of. Across the city, Brittany was sitting in the passenger seat of our mother's luxury SUV, still fuming from our encounter in the utility closet. She was busy typing an angry text to her bridesmaids when her phone vibrated with a high-priority alert. She unlocked the screen expecting a routine confirmation receipt from the Astor Estate Management portal. Instead, she found a stark, legally binding notification from the venue's corporate compliance team. Brittany read the subject line out loud, her voice trembling and her breath catching in her throat. Urgent compliance notice regarding final venue payment. Brenda sharply hit the brakes at a red light, demanding to know what was wrong. Brittany swallowed hard, reading the body of the email. It stated that due to sudden and strict anti-money laundering compliance laws, the final payment of $350,000 could no longer be processed through third-party shell companies or unverified event planning LLCs. The email was utterly ruthless in its corporate terminology, leaving absolutely zero room for negotiation or charm. It explicitly stated that the primary contract holder must immediately provide direct bank statements proving the clean origin of the funds. Furthermore, the venue required a signed, notarized legal affidavit verifying that the money was not being improperly routed, shielded, or laundered through secondary business accounts. The Astor Estate Management team gave them exactly 48 hours to produce the verified financial documents. If the strict deadline was missed, the venue reservation would be automatically canceled, the deposit would be completely forfeited, and the coveted wedding date would be immediately released to the general public. Brittany dropped her phone into her lap, her perfectly manicured hands shaking violently as the reality of the email set in. "They are demanding proof of clean funds, Mom," she whispered in absolute horror, tears welling in her eyes. "They want a full forensic financial audit of my LLC by Thursday afternoon, or they are completely canceling the wedding. I do not have clean bank statements to show them. If this luxury venue completely drops us, the entire high society wedding falls apart in front of the whole city." Less than 20 minutes later, Brittany and Brenda burst through the doors of my parents' suburban home. They found Greg sitting in his dimly lit office, staring blankly at a towering stack of past due notices from heavy equipment suppliers. The illusion of their upper-middle-class wealth was rapidly crumbling inside these very walls. Greg's construction company accounts were not just empty, they were severely overdrawn. He was actively drowning in massive unpayable debt, and the $200,000 markup they had secretly baked into Brittany's wedding venue invoice was his only lifeline to avoid total bankruptcy. Brenda slammed the printed email onto Greg's heavy oak desk. "The venue is blocking the LLC transfer," she shouted, her voice shrill with rising panic. "They triggered an anti-money laundering hold. They want a forensic audit of the funds within 48 hours. What do? We cannot give them your business statements." Greg aggressively rubbed his face, sweat beading on his forehead as he read the corporate notice. "If we submit my corporate accounts, the venue's legal team will instantly see we are insolvent," he muttered. "They will flag it as fraud." Brittany paced the floor, her breathing shallow and fast. "Call Donovan right now," Brenda demanded. "Tell him the venue changed their billing policies. Tell him he needs to wire the $350,000 directly to the Astor estate today." Greg slammed his fist onto the desk, his face turning bright red. "Are you completely out of your mind?" he roared. "Donovan thinks the venue only costs $150,000. If he calls the estate directly to pay, he will see the real price. He will instantly know we inflated the final bill to steal from his family. He will call off the wedding." The room fell into a suffocating, terrified silence. They were completely cornered. They did not have clean cash to pass the compliance audit, and they could not ask the groom without exposing their financial extortion. Greg stood up, walked to a wall safe behind his desk, and punched in the code. He reached inside and pulled out a heavy, sleek piece of metal. It was a solid black American Express card. "Donovan's mother gave you this for minor wedding incidentals," Greg said, holding the card out to Brittany. "Yvonne told you this was only for the florist deposit and the caterer's initial fee." Brittany stared at the black card as if it were a loaded weapon. I cannot put a $350,000 venue charge on the judge's personal credit card, she stammered. Yvonne monitors her statements. She will see the massive charge immediately. Greg grabbed Brittany's hand and forced the metal card into her palm. Swipe the whole $350,000 on this card today, Greg ordered, his voice dropping to a desperate pitch. Do it through the venue's secure online portal right now. We will quietly refund the card next month before Judge Yvonne notices. Brittany stared at the heavy black metal card resting in her trembling palm. The prestigious name Yvonne gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lighting of Greg's cluttered home office. This sleek piece of plastic was supposed to cover simple floral deposits and maybe a modest champagne toast, not fund a massive criminal embezzlement scheme. Brenda stood directly behind her daughter, her breathing shallow and ragged. Greg paced the perimeter of the room like a caged animal, barking at Brittany to open her laptop. Brittany placed the laptop on the mahogany desk and flipped it open. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she navigated to the secure payment gateway for the Astor estate. The screen prompted her for the final balance. She typed $350,000 with unsteady hands. The cursor blinked, waiting for the payment method. She inputted the 16 digits from the black American Express card, carefully typing out the cardholder name as Yvonne. Brenda squeezed Brittany's shoulder, her fingernails digging into the fabric of her blouse. Do it, Brenda ordered, her voice a desperate hiss. Just push the payment through so we can save the company. No one will ever know. Brittany closed her eyes and clicked submit. A small blue circle appeared on the screen, spinning slowly as it processed the data. At that exact moment, 50 miles away, in the corporate financial center of Apex facility, Holdings Carter leaned forward in his chair. A loud, sharp chime echoed across the control room. The massive digital monitor spanning the front wall instantly flashed a brilliant, pulsing red. I sat perfectly still, my eyes locked on the incoming data stream. The proprietary payment gateway I had designed for all Apex properties was operating exactly as intended. It was a digital fortress built to detect, intercept, and paralyze any suspicious financial activity before a single cent could be moved. Carter tapped a few specific keys on his master terminal, pulling up the live transaction attempt in crystal clear, high definition. She actually did it, Carter said, a tone of absolute disbelief coloring his voice. She is attempting to run a $350,000 charge on a third-party credit card to bypass the corporate audit entirely. I watched the numbers roll across the monitor. The trap had flawlessly snapped shut. The highly advanced software intercepted the transaction mid-flight, freezing the massive sum of funds in a secure digital purgatory. Back in the suburban home office, the spinning blue circle on Brittany's laptop abruptly froze. The screen flickered, dropping the payment gateway entirely. A stark, bright red error box materialized in the dead center of her monitor. The bold white text read, "Transaction blocked. Anti-money laundering protocol triggered. Name mismatch detected between contracting entity, Golden Events Limited, and cardholder Yvonne. Contact estate management immediately." Brittany let out a sharp, breathless gasp, shoving her chair backward. It declined. She shrieked, her voice cracking with pure panic. The system completely locked me out. Greg lunged forward, his heavy hands gripping the desk, nearly knocking the silver laptop off the edge. What do you mean it declined? It is a limitless black card. Swipe it again right now and do not stop until it goes through. Brittany frantically hit the digital refresh button and jammed the plastic keys, desperately trying to force the payment through a second time. Another red box appeared, this one displaying a more severe warning. Account permanently locked. Fraud alert dispatched to primary cardholder. Brittany threw her hands over her face, hyperventilating. Do you understand what this means? She sobbed hysterically. Amex just sent an automated fraud warning directly to Donovan's mother. Yvonne is a respected federal judge. If she calls the credit card company to authorize the charge, they are going to show her the itemized venue invoice. She is going to see the massive $350,000 total immediately. She will instantly know I inflated the wedding cost by $200,000. Brenda gripped the edge of the desk, all the color draining from her face. Her perfect manicured reality was violently crashing down around her. The fake luxury lifestyle, the country club status, the wealthy future and laws, it was all evaporating in front of her eyes. Greg began pacing again, kicking a leather wastebasket across the room in a blind rage. "Call the venue!" Greg roared, spit flying from his lips. "Get a manager on the phone. Tell them the system is glitching and they need to bypass the security protocol." Brittany snatched her phone from the desk and dialed the Astor Estate Management office. The line rang endlessly before dropping to a generic, automated voicemail. "They are completely ignoring me," Brittany screamed, throwing her phone against the couch. Brittany snatched her car keys off the desk. Her face twisted into a mask of pure desperation and rage. Her entire future was hanging by a single frayed thread, and she was not about to let some incompetent accounting software destroy her billionaire wedding. "I am not waiting for a callback," Brittany snarled, marching toward the front door. "This is a technical error. The estate manager probably has no idea their payment portal is malfunctioning. I am going to drive down to the estate right now. I will demand to speak to the highest level executive in the building and force them to run this card manually." She slammed the front door shut, the force violently rattling the decorative glass windows of the suburban house. Sprinting to her car, the tires screeching loudly as she backed out of the driveway and sped recklessly down the street. She was gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned bone white, her mind racing with elaborate excuses and sophisticated lies she could feed to the venue staff. Her vision was tunneled by panic and entitlement. She was driving furiously toward the Astor estate, completely unaware that she was walking directly into the center of her sister's inescapable trap. The tires of Brittany's car screeched violently against the pristine cobblestone driveway of the Astor estate. She threw the vehicle into park, leaving it running diagonally across two designated valet spaces, and marched toward the grand entrance. Her face was flushed a blotchy, uneven red, and her breath came in ragged, furious gasps. She pushed past the heavy oak doors, completely ignoring the polite greetings of the front desk concierge, and headed straight for the administrative wing. She kicked open the frosted glass door of the management suite with enough force to crack the hinges. Carter sat behind a polished mahogany desk, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, playing the role of a standard venue director to absolute perfection. He did not flinch when the door slammed against the wall. He simply looked up from his tablet, his expression a mask of mild corporate curiosity. Brittany stormed across the plush carpet and slammed the heavy Black American Express card directly onto Carter's desk. The metal-plastic hybrid made a sharp, aggressive clack against the wood. "Run the card," she demanded, her voice shrill and echoing through the quiet suite. "You are going to process this payment manually, right this exact second. Your defective online portal locked me out, and I am not leaving this office until I have a printed receipt for my wedding." Carter steepled his fingers, glancing down at the card, and then back up at Brittany's manic twitching expression. "I apologize for the inconvenience, ma'am, but that is impossible," he stated with practiced calm. The payment gateway triggered a federal anti-money laundering protocol due to a severe name mismatch and suspicious routing behavior. "The account is frozen. I cannot manually override a compliance lock." Brittany slammed both hands onto the desk, leaning over Carter with her teeth bared. "You are a glorified event coordinator," she screamed, completely losing whatever fragile grip she still had on her sanity. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am marrying into one of the most powerful families in this state. You will type those numbers into your terminal and force the transaction, or I will destroy this entire estate." Carter simply blinked, entirely unbothered by her explosive volume. "Federal financial regulations do not bend to verbal threats, Miss Wilson." Brittany's eyes widened with manic, desperate rage. "Oh, you want to play by the rules? Fine. If you do not run this card right now, I am calling every news station in Chicago. I will tell the press that the Astor estate is deliberately sabotaging my wedding because my fiancé is a prominent black neurosurgeon. I will say you are holding our funds hostage out of pure unfiltered racism. I will have protests outside your gates by tomorrow morning, and you will be completely ruined." She was panting now, a wild-cornered animal willing to leverage the most despicable, baseless lies imaginable to protect her fraudulent cash grab. She pointed a trembling acrylic nail inches from Carter's face, entirely convinced her toxic intimidation tactics would force his submission. From my vantage point in the secure operations center 50 miles away, I watched the live high-definition security feed of the office with cold, clinical fascination. Brittany was not finished. She snatched her phone from her designer handbag, tapped the screen aggressively, and slammed it onto the desk next to the black card. The phone was already connected on speaker. Brenda's voice immediately erupted from the small device, filling the management office with a toxic, shrieking vibrato. "Listen to me, you incompetent little clerk!" Brenda yelled, her voice vibrating with the exact same narcissistic entitlement that had defined my entire childhood. "We are incredibly powerful people. We have the financial backing and the social connections to buy and sell you and this entire venue. You will process my daughter's payment immediately, or I will personally ensure you never work in this industry again." Watching Brenda scream empty threats through a speakerphone perfectly mirrored every single time she had shielded Brittany from the consequences of her own failures. It was the exact same screeching tone she used when she cornered my high school chemistry teacher, threatening to have him fired because Brittany had been caught cheating on her final exam. It was the exact same aggressive volume she weaponized against the manager of a luxury boutique when Brittany was caught shoplifting designer sunglasses, loudly accusing the store of profiling them to avoid a police report. Brenda had spent 3 decades aggressively bullying teachers, employers, and authority figures to ensure her golden child never faced reality, while demanding I sit silently in the background and absorb the collateral damage. Now they were attempting to use those exact same playground bullying tactics against a multi-billion-dollar corporate compliance officer. Carter let the oppressive screaming silence hang in the air for a long moment. He did not break eye contact with Brittany, nor did he lean away from the phone blasting Brenda's unhinged threats. He maintained an aura of absolute terrifying serenity. Slowly, deliberately, Carter reached up and adjusted his glasses. "I do not have the authorization to override a fraud alert, ma'am," he said, his voice cutting through the chaotic energy in the room like a scalpel. "Venue managers do not possess the security clearance to bypass this specific tier of anti-money laundering protocol." Brittany let out a frustrated, guttural scream. "Then get me the person who does!" Carter offered a thin, razor-sharp smile. "Certainly. Let me call the chief executive officer of the parent company that owns the Astor estate. She is the only individual with the requisite biometric clearance to release a frozen contract of this magnitude." He tapped the master console on his desk, routing the direct call through the office's overhead surround sound speakers. The dial tone rang twice loud and crisp. I pressed the flashing green button on my secure terminal. "This is the CEO," I answered, my voice echoing evenly across the room. "How can I help you?" Brittany Carter's hand moved away from the speakerphone button as the crisp, authoritative voice filled the management suite. The audio was pristine, carrying every nuance of the speaker's tone. "This is the chief executive officer," the voice echoed evenly across the room. "I hear someone is attempting to extort my staff using a stolen credit card." Brittany froze. The manic energy that had propelled her into the office instantly evaporated, replaced by a sudden, jarring confusion. The aggressive posture of her shoulders slumped as her brain struggled to process the audio input. She recognized that cadence. She recognized the precise, unapologetic articulation. It was a voice she had spent her entire life talking over, mocking, and silencing. Olivia. Brittany gasped, the name ripping from her throat in a strangled whisper. Brenda, still connected on Brittany's discarded cell phone lying on the mahogany desk, stopped her screeching tirade mid-sentence. The dead silence from the cell phone speaker was deafening. "Yes, Brittany," the voice replied, cool and detached. "It is Olivia. And I am asking why you are standing in my management suite, screaming at my regional director and attempting to force a fraudulent $350,000 charge through my company's payment portal." Brittany staggered backward, her high heels catching on the plush carpet. She looked at Carter, who was calmly adjusting his cuffs, then back to the speakerphone on his desk. Her mind completely rejected the reality of the situation. The mental gymnastics required to reconcile her discarded sister with the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar estate management corporation caused her brain to short-circuit. She looked around the luxurious office, taking in the expensive artwork, the polished mahogany, and Carter's deferential posture toward the speaker box. Brenda's voice finally crackled through the cell phone, her tone thick with venom and desperate denial. Olivia, what kind of sick joke is this? Put the actual venue owner on the phone right now. You have no right to interfere with your sister's wedding. I am not interfering with anything. Mother Olivia responded, the icy professionalism in her voice never wavering. I am simply enforcing federal banking regulations on a transaction flagged for massive irregularities. The credit card submitted does not match the LLC on file. That constitutes financial fraud. Brittany's mind raced, searching for any logical explanation that preserved her worldview. She had spent decades casting Olivia as the family scapegoat, the unremarkable sibling who existed solely to highlight Brittany's brilliance. Hearing Olivia assert authority from the other side of an executive intercom shattered that carefully curated narrative. She gripped the edge of Carter's desk, her knuckles turning white, desperately trying to regain her footing. The walls of the office seemed to close in around her as the crushing weight of her immediate financial ruin collided with the impossibility of her sister's sudden corporate dominance. It was an unacceptable reality. A sharp, hysterical laugh burst from Brittany's lips. It started low, a guttural sound of pure denial, and quickly escalated into a manic shriek that echoed off the frosted glass walls. She slapped her hand against Carter's desk, pointing a trembling finger at the speakerphone. You pathetic cleaner! Brittany shrieked, tears of deranged laughter streaming down her flushed cheeks. You actually sneaked into a management office just to answer the phone. Did you hack the phone line? Or are you sleeping with this glorified event coordinator to get access to the building? Brenda's voice squawked in agreement from the cell phone. She is trespassing. Call the police immediately. Brittany, have her arrested. Brittany leaned closer to the speaker, her eyes wild with vindictive fury. You are so obsessed with my success that you broke into a corporate office to sabotage me. This is a new low even for you, Olivia. I am calling the police right this second to have you arrested for trespassing and corporate espionage. When Yvonne finds out my deranged, jealous sister tried to ruin her son's wedding by hacking a venue's phone system, she will personally see you locked in a federal penitentiary. You are a complete joke. The delusion was profound, a massive psychological defense mechanism deployed to protect Brittany's fragile ego from utter destruction. She refused to look at the undeniable evidence surrounding her. The high security clearance, Carter's unwavering professional deference, the proprietary software tracking their exact movements. Instead, she chose to believe in a wild, convoluted conspiracy where her sister was a rogue criminal infiltrating a luxury estate. She pulled her shoulders back, attempting to project the haughty, untouchable confidence she had always weaponized against Olivia, convinced that her loud, aggressive volume would bend reality back to her will. The hysterical laughter died in the air as Carter remained perfectly still, completely unfazed by the threat of police intervention. He simply clasped his hands together and waited. Call them. Brittany Olivia's voice replied, ice-cold and devoid of any warmth. Call the police. I am sure they would be highly interested in discussing the origins of the $350,000 transaction you just attempted to process. But before you dial 911, you might want to check your email. Right on cue, a sharp, piercing ping echoed from Brittany's cell phone resting on the desk. The notification illuminated the screen, pushing Brenda's active call to the background. Brittany's eyes darted to the glowing rectangle. It was a high-priority alert. The sender was Yvonne Thornton. Brittany's breath hitched. Her trembling hand reached out, swiping the notification to read the text. The subject line was stamped in bold red letters. Urgent fraudulent, $350,000 charge attempt. The preview text below was a direct, legally threatening demand from the federal judge, demanding to know why Golden Events Limited had just attempted to drain her private account for a venue fee she was explicitly told cost exactly $150,000. Brittany stared at the black metal card resting in her trembling palm. The prestigious name of Judge Yvonne Thornton gleamed under the fluorescent lighting of Greg's cluttered home office. This sleek piece of plastic was supposed to cover simple floral deposits and a modest champagne toast, not fund a criminal embezzlement scheme. Brenda stood behind her daughter, her breathing shallow, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the back of Brittany's chair. Greg paced the room like a caged animal, his face flushed crimson, barking at Brittany to open her laptop and finish the transaction immediately. Brittany placed the silver laptop on the mahogany desk and flipped it open. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she navigated to the secure payment gateway for the Astor estate. The screen prompted her for the final balance. She typed $350,000 with unsteady hands. The cursor blinked rhythmically, waiting for the payment method. She inputted the 16 digits from the Black American Express card, typing out the cardholder name exactly as it appeared on the metal surface. Brenda squeezed Brittany's shoulder, her fingernails digging into the silk blouse. "Do it," Brenda ordered, her voice a desperate hiss. "Just push the payment through so we can save the company. No one will ever know." Brittany closed her eyes, took a ragged breath, and clicked submit. A small blue circle appeared on the screen, spinning slowly as it processed the data. At that exact moment, 50 miles away in the corporate financial center of Apex Facility Holdings, the proprietary software I had personally designed was operating exactly as intended. It was a digital fortress built to detect, intercept, and paralyze suspicious financial activity before a single cent could be moved. The payment gateway cross referenced the incoming credit card data against the registered master contract for Golden Events Limited. The system instantly recognized the glaring discrepancy. The algorithms locked onto the massive sum, engaging a hard block that intercepted the transaction mid-flight. The spinning blue circle abruptly froze. The screen flickered, dropping the payment gateway entirely, leaving her staring at a blank page while the trap flawlessly snapped shut. The silence became suffocating as seconds ticked by without a confirmation receipt. Brittany leaned closer to the monitor, her heart pounding against her ribs. The digital silence was agonizing, holding the fate of their fraudulent existence. Suddenly, the white screen vanished. A stark red error box materialized in the dead center of her monitor. The bold text read, "Transaction blocked. Anti-money laundering protocol triggered. Name mismatch detected between contracting entity Golden Events Limited and cardholder Yvonne Thornton. Contact estate management immediately." Brittany let out a sharp gasp, shoving her chair backward. It declined. She shrieked, her voice cracking with pure panic. "The system completely locked me out." Greg lunged forward, gripping the desk, nearly knocking the laptop onto the floor. "What do you mean it declined?" Greg roared. "It is a limitless black card. Swipe it again right now and do not stop until it goes through." Brittany frantically hit the refresh button and jammed the keys, trying to force the payment through a second time. Another red box appeared, displaying a far more severe warning. "Account permanently locked. Fraud alert dispatched to primary cardholder." Brittany threw her hands over her face, hyperventilating. "Do you understand what this means?" she sobbed hysterically, her perfect facade crumbling into absolute terror. Amex just sent an automated fraud warning directly to Donovan's mother. Yvonne is a respected federal judge. If she calls the credit card company to authorize the charge, they are going to show her the itemized venue invoice. She is going to see the massive $350,000 total immediately. She will instantly know I inflated the wedding cost by $200,000 to steal from her family. Brenda gripped the desk, the color draining from her face. Her upper-class reality was crashing down. The luxury lifestyle, the country club status, the wealthy future-in-laws, it was all evaporating. Greg began pacing again, kicking a wastebasket across the room in a blind rage. "Call the venue," Greg yelled. "Get a manager on the phone. Tell them the system is glitching and they need to bypass the security protocol manually." Brittany snatched her phone from the desk and dialed the Astor Estate Management office. The line rang endlessly before dropping to an automated voicemail. "They are completely ignoring me," Brittany screamed, throwing her phone onto the couch. "They have frozen the money and locked the portal. We are entirely out of options." The walls of the office seemed to close in around them, the crushing weight of impending bankruptcy and criminal fraud charges suffocating their breath. Their elaborate embezzlement scheme had just collided with an impenetrable wall of corporate compliance. Brittany snatched her car keys off the desk, her face twisted into a mask of desperation and unhinged rage. Her entire future was hanging by a single frayed thread, and she was not about to let some incompetent accounting software destroy her billionaire wedding. "I am not waiting for a call back," Brittany snarled, marching toward the front door. "This is a technical error. The estate manager probably has no idea their payment portal is malfunctioning. I am going to drive down to the estate right now. I will demand to speak to the highest level executive and force them to run this card manually." She slammed the front door shut, the force rattling the decorative glass windows of the suburban house. Sprinting to her car, she backed out of the driveway, tires screeching loudly against the asphalt. She sped recklessly down the street, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned bone white. Her panicked mind raced with elaborate, fabricated excuses she could feed the venue staff. Blinded by her own massive entitlement and rising panic, she drove her vehicle furiously toward the Astor estate, unaware she was walking directly into her sister's inescapable trap. The sun had barely crested the Chicago skyline when a fleet of black luxury limousines turned onto the private tree-lined drive of the Astor estate. It was exactly 6 o'clock on Saturday morning. Inside the lead vehicle, Brittany sat engulfed in a cloud of white silk and tulle, frantically barking orders at her terrified bridesmaids. Brenda sat opposite her, reapplying her lipstick with shaky hands. The tension radiating from the two women was absolute. They had barely survived the rehearsal dinner interrogation. Brenda's despicable lie about a deceased eldest daughter had temporarily placated Donovan, but Greg had spent the entire night pacing their hotel suite, terrified that Yvonne's razor-sharp legal instincts had not been entirely subdued. They just needed to get inside the venue, set up the lavish floral arrangements, and force the wedding ceremony to happen before the massive financial fraud unraveled completely. The smooth ride abruptly ended. The limousine jerked to a sudden jarring halt, throwing Brittany forward against her seatbelt. She shrieked, demanding to know why the driver had stopped a full mile short of the Grand Manor house. Greg rolled down the privacy partition and looked out the windshield. His heavy jaw dropped. The massive wrought iron entrance gates of the Astor estate were barricaded. Thick, heavy steel chains were wrapped tightly around the ornate metalwork, secured by a pair of industrial-grade padlocks. 4 private security contractors dressed in tactical black uniforms stood in a formidable line across the driveway. They held digital clipboards and stared blankly at the idling fleet of wedding vehicles. Brittany pounded her fists against the leather seats, her face turning an ugly shade of crimson. "Open the gates," she screamed at the driver. "Tell them the bride is here. This is my wedding day, and I am not waiting in a driveway like some commoner." Greg pushed open the heavy car door and stepped out into the crisp morning air, his face pale and sweating. He marched up to the barricade, puffing out his chest to project a false sense of wealthy authority. "Listen to me," Greg ordered, pointing a trembling finger at the lead guard. "We have a multi-million-dollar event starting in 3 hours. Unlock these gates right now, or I will have your supervisor fire every single one of you." The lead security guard did not blink. He stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel, and handed Greg a crisp, legally binding document printed on heavy, watermarked corporate cardstock. Greg snatched the paper, his eyes darting frantically across the dense legal text. His breathing turned shallow and rapid. "This is a joke," Greg stammered, his voice completely devoid of its usual arrogant bluster. "This cannot be real." Brenda and Brittany shoved their way out of the limousine, the train of Brittany's custom gown dragging across the dirty asphalt. "What is happening?" Brenda shrieked, grabbing the document from Greg's hands. "Read it!" Brittany demanded, stomping her foot. "What does it say?" Greg swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the barricaded gates. "Contract permanently terminated due to a direct breach of the corporate fraud clause." He read aloud, his voice shaking violently. "Property locked down by order of Apex Facility Holdings. All unauthorized personnel must vacate the premises immediately. For further inquiries, contact the CEO." Brittany snatched this paper from Brenda, staring at the bold corporate letterhead. Apex Facility Holdings. Brittany yelled, her voice echoing shrilly in the quiet morning air. I do not even know what that is. Who is the CEO? Look them up right now. Greg fumbled for his smartphone, his thick fingers slipping against the screen as he desperately typed the company name into the search engine. The official corporate website loaded instantly. He tapped the Executive Leadership tab. The high-resolution page materialized on his screen. Greg stopped breathing. The smartphone slipped from his trembling grip, clattering loudly against the pavement. Brenda picked it up, letting out a sharp, breathless gasp. Her face drained of all color, turning a sickly, translucent white. She staggered backward, clutching her chest as if she had been physically struck. Give it to me, Brittany demanded, tearing the phone from her mother's hands. She stared at the screen. Centered perfectly on the page was a brilliant professional corporate headshot of the chief executive officer. The woman in the photograph wore a tailored designer suit, her posture radiating absolute power and untouchable authority. Underneath the photo, the sleek typography read Olivia Wilson, founder and CEO. Brittany's knees buckled. The color vanished from her face. The dead sister they had used as a pathetic excuse to cover their financial crimes was the billionaire owner of the venue. The trap had fully and completely closed. High above the waking city, I sat perfectly still at the sprawling marble island of my luxury penthouse. The morning sun streamed through the panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm golden glow across the quiet room. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my freshly brewed espresso. The rich, dark roast was immaculate. Resting silently on the cool marble surface directly in front of me was my personal cell phone. The screen illuminated with a relentless rhythmic intensity. The notifications stacked on top of each other in rapid succession. Missed call Brittany. Missed call Mom. Missed call Greg. I watched the small red counter on the screen tick upward with mathematical precision. 107, 108, 109 missed calls. The sheer desperation radiating through the digital silence was palpable. Suddenly, a new text message banner popped up, overlaying the mountain of missed calls. It was from Brenda. Please, Olivia, don't do this. You'll ruin her life. I stared at the pathetic plea for exactly 2 seconds. I set my espresso cup down, turned the phone face down against the marble, and let the screen go completely dark. The atmosphere inside the exclusive, dimly lit private dining room of Atlanta's most prestigious steakhouse was suffocating. It was the night before the wedding, and the rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a joyous celebration of the union between two prominent families. Instead, the air crackled with an unspoken, razor-sharp tension that threatened to shatter the elegant crystal glasses lining the long mahogany table. Waiters moved silently through the room, pouring vintage champagne and serving plates of seared Wagyu beef, oblivious to the impending explosion. Brittany sat rigidly beside Donovan, forcefully gripping his hand, her knuckles white. Her smile was a fragile, terrified grimace. Across the room, Brenda and Greg stood near a sprawling floral arrangement, aggressively attempting to project an aura of relaxed, wealthy nonchalance. Their performance shattered the moment Judge Yvonne Thornton approached them. Yvonne did not glide. She marched. Her posture was uncompromising, her expression carved from pure ice. She bypassed the pleasantries, her dark analytical eyes locking onto Greg's sweating face. She motioned sharply toward a secluded alcove near the wine cellar, a silent demand that left no room for negotiation. Greg and Brenda exchanged a panicked, desperate glance before following the formidable matriarch into the shadows. As soon as they were out of earshot of the other guests, Yvonne turned, her voice dropping to a dangerously low, lethal whisper that echoed off the glass walls of the cellar. I want an explanation, Yvonne demanded, her tone completely devoid of warmth. And I want it right now. Brenda attempted a nervous, fluttering laugh. Yvonne, whatever is the matter? The dinner is absolutely beautiful. Do not insult my intelligence. Yvonne snapped, cutting her off instantly. My private financial institution contacted me this afternoon regarding an urgent fraud alert. Someone attempted to process a charge of $350,000 on my card. The transaction was flagged and permanently blocked by the payment portal for the Astor estate. Brenda's breath hitched in her throat. Greg swallowed hard, tugging violently at his silk collar, as if it were choking him. Yvonne stepped closer, her legal instincts fully engaged, dissecting their panicked reactions with surgical precision. The contract we explicitly agreed upon stated the venue fee was exactly $150,000. Yvonne continued, her voice tightening like a vice. Yet your daughter somehow managed to inflate that total by $200,000 in a single unauthorized swipe. Are you attempting to extort my family, Greg? Because if you are, I promise you I will not hesitate to involve federal authorities. The walls of the alcove felt like they were shrinking. The inescapable weight of their financial crimes was finally crashing down, cornering them in a high-end restaurant surrounded by hundreds of wealthy witnesses. Greg opened his mouth, stammering pathetically, but the words withered on his tongue. He was completely unable to formulate a single coherent, believable lie to save them from absolute total ruin. The grand illusion was rapidly failing, and they were trapped. With Greg completely paralyzed by fear, Brenda realized she had to seize control of the narrative before Yvonne contacted the police. Reaching deep into her arsenal of toxic manipulation, Brenda deployed her ultimate, most despicable tactic. She squeezed her eyes shut and forced a violently loud sob from her throat. Instantly, fat manufactured tears began cascading down her carefully powdered cheeks. She covered her face with both hands, her shoulders shaking with an entirely fabricated display of profound maternal devastation. "Please forgive us, Yvonne," Brenda wailed, her voice cracking with practiced theatrical agony as she reached out to grasp the judge's immaculate blazer. "You have to understand the immense pressure we are under. Today is an incredibly dark day for our family. It is the 5th anniversary of our beloved eldest daughter's tragic death from terminal cancer." Yvonne recoiled slightly, her stern posture softening by a fraction of an inch as the sudden, overwhelming declaration of grief caught her off guard. Brenda sniffled loudly, wiping her eyes and leaning heavily against Greg to sell the performance. "Brittany has been an absolute wreck all week," Brenda continued, her voice hitching perfectly on cue. She missed her older sister so much that she was completely overcome with blinding grief while handling the final vendor payments this morning. She was sobbing so hard that she accidentally made a massive clerical error with the venue portal. She mistakenly typed in the wrong numbers while trying to process the security deposit. "We are so humiliated. We were just trying to fix the terrible mistake quietly before the ceremony to avoid causing any unnecessary stress for Donovan. Please, Yvonne, you simply must believe me. We would never steal from your family. We are simply a grieving family trying to survive the absolute worst day of our lives." Donovan, observing the emotional breakdown from the dining table, rushed over and wrapped his arms protectively around Brittany. He pulled his weeping fiancée close, kissing the top of her head while glaring at his mother, implicitly demanding she drop the brutal interrogation to respect their overwhelming tragedy. Brittany buried her face in his jacket, expertly hiding her triumphant, wicked smirk. But Yvonne did not soften. The judge narrowed her dark eyes, her razor-sharp legal instincts instantly tingling with severe suspicion. The sudden theatrical sobbing, the overly convenient timeline, the wildly inflated financial error, none of it added up in her analytical mind. Yvonne knew genuine grief, and Brenda's performance felt entirely hollow. Without offering a single word of comfort, Yvonne turned on her heel and stepped outside onto the quiet restaurant patio. The cool night air hit her face as she pulled her secure phone from her pocket. She dialed a number she kept on speed dial. It rang exactly 2 times. "Run a full background check on Brenda Wilson's supposedly deceased eldest daughter," Yvonne commanded her elite private investigator, her voice echoing into the darkness. "Do not stop digging until you find me the actual certified death certificates." The tinted window of the lead SUV glided down silently, revealing a glimpse of sharp features before the heavy armored door swung open. Tactical boots stepped onto the pristine gravel, followed instantly by the sharp, authoritative click of stiletto heels. Olivia emerged into the glaring afternoon sun, a vision of uncompromising corporate dominance. She wore a tailored midnight blue power suit that cut a striking silhouette against the chaotic backdrop of the driveway. A vintage platinum Patek Philippe watch gleamed on her left wrist, catching the light as she adjusted her lapel. She moved with a predatory grace, her posture radiating absolute authority. Flanking her immediately were Carter, the regional director who had remained utterly unfazed by Brittany's manic threats the previous morning, and two towering corporate lawyers clutching thick leather briefcases. The private security contractors, the same men who had barred the gates to 300 of Atlanta's most elite socialites, instantly formed a protective perimeter around her, snapping to rigid attention. The collective murmur of the crowd died instantly. Politicians, renowned neurosurgeons, and wealthy socialites parted like the Red Sea as Olivia marched toward the epicenter of the disaster. Brittany stood frozen next to Donovan. Her custom bridal gown suddenly looked absurd and costumey against the harsh reality of the barricade. Her jaw worked soundlessly. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her complexion an ashen, sickly white. She was staring at a ghost. She was staring at the woman she had spent her entire life stepping on, the woman she had literally pronounced dead just 12 hours ago to save her own skin. Greg took a staggering step backward, his chest heaving under his tight tuxedo jacket. He looked wildly around for an escape route, but the high iron fences and rows of parked luxury vehicles boxed them in completely. Olivia stopped precisely 6 feet away from the wedding party. She did not look at the confused guests murmuring in the background. She did not look at Donovan, who was watching the scene unfold with mounting bewilderment. Her piercing gaze locked entirely onto Brenda. The silence was thick, heavy, and incredibly dangerous. The atmosphere was charged with the kind of electric tension that precedes a massive lightning strike. Carter stepped forward, handing Olivia an electronic tablet displaying the venue's legal lockdown status, but her eyes never left her mother. This was the moment of reckoning, the exact second the carefully constructed lies of the Wilson family collided with an unstoppable, multi-billion-dollar reality. Every single guest held their breath, completely captivated by the intense standoff unfolding in the shadow of the locked iron gates. She handed the tablet back to Carter with a slight nod, standing tall, a monument to the hard-won success she had built from absolute nothingness. The raw power she commanded right now was undeniable, and it paralyzed her abusers. Brenda's fragile grip on reality finally snapped. Her eyes bulged wildly and her face contorted into a mask of pure, unhinged desperation. She pointed a trembling finger with a jagged acrylic nail directly at Olivia's face. "Arrest her!" Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking into a hysterical, screeching pitch that echoed off the stone pillars of the estate. "She is a crazy stalker. She is the janitor. I demand you arrest this woman immediately for trespassing and ruining my daughter's wedding. She is a dangerous, delusional cleaner who broke into this property." Two of the security guards stepped forward, instinctively responding to the screaming, but they positioned themselves to protect Olivia, not to apprehend her. Brenda lunged forward, grabbing the arm of a nearby police officer who had been hired for traffic control. "Do your job and arrest that deranged stalker," Brenda yelled, her chest heaving with fabricated panic. Before the officer could even react, Yvonne Thornton stepped directly into the line of fire. The formidable federal judge raised a single commanding hand, instantly silencing Brenda's unhinged screaming. The authority in Yvonne's gesture was absolute. She bypassed Brenda entirely and walked straight up to Olivia, her sharp eyes scanning the young woman's face. Brenda tried to interrupt, sputtering nonsensical insults, but Yvonne shot her a glare so lethal it froze the older woman mid-sentence. Yvonne turned her full attention back to Olivia, completely ignoring the flailing wedding party behind her. The pieces of a massive, elaborate puzzle were finally falling into place inside the judge's brilliant legal mind. Her stern features softened slightly as she connected the dots. "You are the woman who fixed the air conditioning vent in the bridal suite," Yvonne stated, her voice carrying a resonant clarity that cut through the murmuring crowd. "You are the cleaner who found my heirloom diamond brooch when Brittany claimed it was stolen." Olivia smiled warmly at Yvonne, the icy corporate exterior melting away to reveal genuine respect. "I am your honor," Olivia replied, her voice steady and clear. It is a pleasure to see you again under better circumstances. I am also Olivia, the Chief Executive Officer of Apex Facility Holdings and the sole owner of this entire estate. She paused, letting the immense weight of her title settle over the crowd, then shifted her gaze back to the hyperventilating woman in the mother of the bride dress. And according to my mother screaming over there, Olivia continued, her tone dropping to a chilling razor-sharp edge. I am her eldest daughter, who tragically passed away from terminal cancer 5 years ago. A collective audible gasp ripped through the crowd of 300 elite guests. The sheer magnitude of the deception hit the audience like a physical shockwave. Politicians whispered furiously to their spouses. Surgeons stared in open-mouthed disbelief. Donovan slowly turned his head, his eyes wide and hollow. He stared at Brittany in absolute, unadulterated horror, finally realizing he was about to marry a sociopathic monster. Donovan physically pulled his arm out of Brittany's grasp. The sudden loss of his support sent a shockwave through her system. Her survival instincts, honed by decades of Brenda's enabling, kicked into overdrive. Brittany collapsed to the gravel. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with violent theatrical sobs that echoed across the quiet estate grounds. "She is lying!" Brittany wailed, peering through her fingers to gauge Donovan's reaction. "She is completely insane, Donovan. You have to believe me. Olivia has always been obsessed with me. She has been jealous of my life since we were children. She forged all of this just to ruin my wedding day." Brenda immediately flanked her golden child, dropping to her knees and wrapping her arms around Brittany's shaking shoulders. Brenda's face was a mask of furious, manufactured maternal outrage. She glared at Judge Yvonne Thornton, then turned her venom toward the crowd of elite guests. "Do you see what we have had to deal with?" Brenda cried out, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. "This is exactly why we had to tell people she was dead. She is severely mentally ill. She stalked us all the way to Atlanta, built this elaborate delusional fantasy, and hired these actors to play security guards. She hacked into a corporate website to put her picture there. My poor Brittany has done nothing but try to build a beautiful life, and her deranged sister will stop at nothing to destroy it." The sheer audacity of the lie was breathtaking. Brenda and Brittany were cornered by undeniable multi-billion-dollar reality. Yet they doubled down on their fabricated victimhood, completely convinced that their tears could wash away empirical evidence. Brittany reached out for Donovan's pant leg, sobbing hysterically, begging him to protect her from her cruel, vindictive sister. I stood 6 feet away, my hands resting loosely at my sides. I did not shout. I did not interrupt their screeching performance. I simply watched them unravel. Years ago, their synchronized weeping would have triggered a deep, anxious guilt within me. I would have folded, apologized, and shrunk away to keep the peace. Now, looking at the 2 women who had treated me like disposable garbage for 3 decades, I felt absolutely nothing but clinical detachment. Their manipulation tactics were powerless against the fortress I had built. Yvonne crossed her arms, her judicial glare cutting right through the amateur theatrics. Donovan took another step back, staring at Brittany as if she were a venomous snake. The crowd murmured a restless wave of confusion and shifting loyalties. I turned my head slightly and caught Carter's eye. I gave him a single subtle nod. The time for allowing their toxic narrative to pollute the air was over. We were going to dismantle their carefully constructed reality piece by piece in front of the exact audience they so desperately wanted to impress. They had played their final hand, and it was pathetically weak. The game was mine. Carter tapped an earpiece and issued a swift, silent command. The rear doors of one of the black SUVs swung open, revealing a highly sophisticated mobile media center. 2 technicians stepped out swiftly, deploying a heavy-duty, high-lumen industrial projector from the back of the vehicle. They aimed the massive lens directly at the smooth, pale limestone wall of the estate's grand entrance. Carter did not ask for silence. He demanded it with a deafening blast of audio. The custom surround sound speakers originally installed across the estate grounds to play romantic wedding melodies roared to life. The crystal-clear audio from the supply closet filled the air. "Take this $500 and keep your mouth shut." Brittany's arrogant, sneering voice echoed across the driveway, entirely devoid of the weeping victimhood she was currently displaying. You are just a cleaner. Nobody is going to believe you over me. The crowd stiffened. Brittany's sobbing abruptly stopped. She froze on the gravel, her eyes darting frantically toward the stone wall. Then Brenda's venomous, unmistakable shriek blasted through the speakers. I took your grandfather's money to buy Brittany fake breasts because she deserves it. You are nothing but an ungrateful little brat who contributes absolutely nothing to this family. You will keep your mouth shut, do your job, and let your sister have her perfect day, or I will make sure you are fired and living on the streets. The acoustic projection bounced off the luxury vehicles and iron gates, broadcasting their profound cruelty to 300 of Atlanta's most elite citizens. The sheer malice in their recorded voices contrasted violently with the pathetic crying women huddled on the ground. The facade of the wealthy, grieving aristocratic family evaporated instantly, exposing the greedy, manipulative bullies underneath for all to see. A wave of absolute disgust washed over the crowd. High society politicians shook their heads in revulsion. Renowned surgeons covered their mouths, appalled by the grotesque confession of stealing inheritance money for plastic surgery. The whispers grew into a loud collective judgment. They were looking at Brenda and Brittany not with pity, but with pure, unadulterated contempt. Donovan looked physically ill. He stared down at Brittany, his face pale, finally comprehending the true nature of the woman he had almost married. I stepped forward, my designer heels crunching deliberately against the gravel, drawing every eye back to me. I looked down at my mother and sister, refusing to offer them a single ounce of mercy. That was just family drama, I announced to the captivated crowd, my voice projecting crisp and clear over the murmuring guests. I turned my attention directly to Judge Yvonne Thornton, whose eyes were locked onto mine with fierce analytical intensity. Now let's talk about the federal crime. I gestured toward Greg, who was attempting to melt into the shadows of the limousine. Let us discuss exactly how these three upstanding citizens attempted to defraud a sitting federal judge out of $200,000. Carter stepped forward seamlessly, assuming the role of corporate executioner. He tapped his tablet and the projection on the limestone wall instantly shifted. The audio waveforms vanished, replaced by a massive high-resolution financial audit featuring bank logos, routing numbers, and glaring red highlight boxes. The undeniable paper trail of the family's absolute greed was now 50 feet tall and brightly illuminated for Atlanta's high society to scrutinize. Allow me to direct your attention to the vendor payment portal, Carter announced, his voice booming through the surround sound speakers with crisp, unforgiving clarity. 2 months ago, Brittany Wilson registered a limited liability company in the state of Delaware under the name Astor Events Management, LLC. The title was intentionally deceptive, designed to mimic the official corporate entity of this property, the Astor Estate. However, this shell company had absolutely zero legal affiliation with our venue. It was nothing more than a fraudulent bank account created for a single highly illegal purpose. Carter pressed a button and a split screen appeared. On the left was the official legally binding contract generated by our company for the venue rental, totaling exactly $150,000. On the right was the fraudulent invoice Brittany had personally handed to Judge Yvonne Thornton, demanding $350,000. By inserting her shell company as a mandatory third-party vendor, Brittany engineered a system to intercept the payment, Carter explained, tracing the flow of money with a green laser pointer. She intended to pay the actual venue fee and quietly pocket the inflated $200,000 difference. It was a classic textbook wire fraud scheme. But the sheer desperation of this family did not end there. Carter advanced to the next slide, displaying a time-stamped security log and a declined credit card receipt. Greg visibly flinched as his name appeared on the massive screen. This morning at precisely 5:45, Gregory Wilson attempted to forcefully bypass the venue's secure payment gateway. Knowing their fraudulent LLC had been flagged and frozen by our accounting department days ago, Greg panicked. He manually keyed Judge Thornton's private black card information directly into an unauthorized merchant terminal, attempting to force a raw charge of $350,000. He tried to steal the money before the wedding even began, desperately hoping the joyous chaos of the event would mask the massive theft. Instead, his reckless panicking action triggered an immediate catastrophic fraud alert, with federal banking authorities instantly locking the property down and permanently terminating their contract. "The evidence is insurmountable," Carter stated, dropping the laser pointer to his side. "We have frozen the shell account and handed the entire digital dossier over to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. Gregory and Brittany Wilson did not make a clerical error. They executed a premeditated, coordinated effort to extort Judge Thornton. And they would have gotten away with it too, if they had not chosen to target a property owned by the daughter they erased." Donovan looked physically ill. The blood had completely drained from his face, leaving behind an ashen, sickly pallor. His chest heaved as the horrifying reality of the presentation crashed into him, destroying the pristine, innocent facade Brittany had painstakingly maintained. He turned his head slowly, staring at the woman he had loved, the woman he had blindly defended against his own mother's sharp, relentless intuition. "You were stealing from my mother?" Donovan asked, his voice trembling with a potent, devastating mixture of heartbreak and rising, unadulterated fury. "You used my family as a bank to cover your father's failing business." Brittany's eyes widened in sheer, unrestrained panic. She scrambled forward, the heavy silken tulle of her elaborate bridal gown dragging through the dirt. "No, Donovan, please," she sobbed, throwing her hands out to grasp his tuxedo jacket. "It is a lie. It is all a massive, elaborate lie. I swear to you, I would never do that. I love you." "Do not touch me!" Donovan snarled. He violently pulled his arm away from her frantic grip. The sudden, forceful rejection sent Brittany stumbling backward, her designer heels slipping awkwardly on the uneven gravel. "You lied to me about everything. You lied about your sister dying. You lied about the money. You are a disgusting, manipulative criminal, and this wedding is permanently canceled." Behind him, Judge Yvonne Thornton stood tall, an unmovable pillar of righteous, devastating victory. She did not gloat. She did not even shout. She simply watched the pathetic trash take itself out with an expression of cold, magnificent satisfaction, her pristine reputation entirely shielded from their venomous, parasitic grasp. Greg and Brenda were completely paralyzed by the sudden sheer magnitude of their catastrophic public exposure, staring blankly as their ultimate golden meal ticket irrevocably severed all ties. I let the silence stretch for a moment, savoring the absolute destruction of their unearned arrogance. But I was not finished. The financial devastation was merely the prelude to the true, ugly core of their deceit. "I have one final exhibit to present to you all today," I announced, motioning for Carter to play the final file. This audio was captured by the estate's high-definition security system when Brenda and Brittany were privately touring the property 3 weeks ago. The massive speakers crackled and Brenda's unmistakable shrill voice echoed loudly across the manicured grounds. "These rich black families are just stupid ATMs." Brenda's recorded voice bragged with venomous, sickening delight. "They are so desperate to show off their new money. Bleed them dry, sweetie. Take every single cent they have and do not ever look back." The 300 elite guests erupted into furious, disgusted whispers. The deep, vicious racism and unfathomable disrespect completely obliterated any lingering shred of pity for the sobbing bride on the ground. That was the true Wilson family legacy, I declared, watching the uniformed police approach our location. "Now, gentlemen, please feel completely free to immediately handcuff these absolute monsters and finally arrest them." The echo of Brenda's vile audio recording faded into the crisp afternoon air, but the toxic resonance of her words lingered. 300 of Atlanta's most prominent citizens stood completely immobilized. Absolute silence fell over the sprawling driveway. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal paralyzed the crowd. These were not just affluent guests. They were powerful politicians, celebrated neurosurgeons, corporate executives, and community leaders who had gathered to witness a union of equals. Instead, They had been subjected to the most grotesque display of racism and predatory exploitation imaginable. The Wilson family's true nature was utterly laid bare. They were not a respectable grieving family seeking to join high society. They were parasites. The illusion of their wealthy aristocratic pedigree evaporated, leaving behind nothing but the undeniable stench of greed and bigotry. The guests stared at Brenda, Greg, and Brittany with undisguised revulsion. No one whispered. No one moved. The collective disgust was a physical weight pressing down on the driveway. Into this heavy, suffocating silence stepped Judge Yvonne Thornton. Yvonne did not scream. She did not throw a tantrum or lose her composure. Instead, she drew upon decades of experience presiding over federal courtrooms. She transformed the gravel driveway into her personal bench. Her posture was uncompromisingly rigid, her chin held high, radiating a terrifying, icy calm that made the surrounding air feel freezing. She adjusted the cuffs of her immaculate blazer and walked forward. Every step she took was deliberate, measuring the exact distance between herself and the people who had attempted to bleed her family dry. The crowd parted for her effortlessly. Yvonne possessed a formidable aura, an unyielding presence that commanded immediate absolute respect. She stopped directly in front of Brenda and Greg. The older couple shrank backward, their previous arrogance entirely extinguished. Brenda's manufactured tears had stopped flowing. Her mouth hung open in a silent, pathetic display of terror. She tried to formulate a defense and excuse any string of words to mitigate the catastrophic damage, but her vocal cords refused to cooperate. Yvonne simply stared at them. Her dark eyes were devoid of any warmth, any empathy, or any mercy. She analyzed them the same way she analyzed hardened criminals standing in chains before her podium. She saw right through their designer clothing and frantic sweating. She saw the core of their deceit. "You invited us into your home under the guise of unity," Yvonne began, her voice steady and echoing with flawless diction. "You sat at my dining table, ate my food, and smiled in my face while secretly plotting to steal our wealth. You viewed my family, my heritage, and my hard-earned success as nothing more than an automated teller machine to fund your pathetic vanity." Brenda whimpered, clutching Greg's arm, but Yvonne took another step forward, forcing them to cower further against the side of the black luxury vehicle. "You are a complete and total disgrace to the very concept of human decency, and your sheer audacity is genuinely insulting." Yvonne shifted her piercing gaze from the trembling mother to the sweating, red-faced father. Greg looked as though he might collapse from a sudden heart attack. His breathing was shallow, his eyes darting frantically for an escape route that simply did not exist. His chest heaved under his tuxedo. "As a sitting federal judge, I am legally obligated to report wire fraud and credit card theft," Yvonne stated. Her voice was not a threat, it was a guaranteed promise. "You attempted to forcefully extract $350,000 from my private accounts. You utilized a fraudulent shell company to execute a premeditated scheme across state lines. The authorities have already been provided with the digital evidence, the security footage, and your own recorded confessions. You will not escape this." Yvonne did not wait for a response. She turned her back on the Wilsons entirely, completely dismissing their existence, and faced her son. Donovan was staring at Brittany, his features hardened into a mask of pure betrayal and profound disgust. "We are leaving," Yvonne told him softly, her tone carrying the absolute finality of a gavel striking wood. Donovan did not argue. He did not ask for a moment to say goodbye. He looked down at the delicate, expensive white rose boutonniere pinned to the lapel of his custom tuxedo. It was a symbol of a future that had just been violently destroyed. With a sharp, aggressive movement, Donovan ripped the flower from his jacket. He dropped the crushed petals directly onto the dirt at Brittany's feet. He turned around, joining his mother, and walked toward their waiting Maybach without looking back at Brittany, even a single time. His broad shoulders were set with unwavering resolve, leaving behind the toxic wreckage of a fraudulent relationship forever. He was done. The reality of Donovan's departure shattered Brittany completely. Her knees buckled under the weight of her own catastrophic failure. She collapsed violently onto the harsh gravel driveway, the impact tearing the delicate fabric of her $15,000 custom bridal gown. The pristine white silk quickly soaked up the dark, muddy water pooling near the tires. She began wailing, clawing at the dirt, screaming Donovan's name into the empty air, but the luxury vehicles were already pulling away from the barricaded gates. Greg realized the absolute terrifying finality of the situation. His business was bankrupt. His daughter's wealthy future was destroyed. He was facing undeniable imminent federal prison time for wire fraud. The flashing lights of the approaching police cruisers reflected off the iron gates. Panic consumed him entirely. Greg dropped to his knees in the sharp gravel. He abandoned every shred of his pride and dignity. He crawled forward on all fours, dragging his expensive trousers through the mud, desperately moving directly toward Olivia to beg for mercy. He frantically reached his two hands out, his trembling, sweaty hands, grasping toward the polished tips of her designer heels. He was ready to surrender completely. His life was absolutely and entirely ruined forever. Greg's trembling hands clamped around my ankles, his manicured fingernails digging into the expensive leather of my designer heels. The man who had spent his entire life cultivating an aura of absolute superiority, who had demanded absolute obedience and perfection from everyone around him, was now a weeping, pathetic mess crawling in the mud. His custom tuxedo was ruined, soaked with dirty water from the driveway puddles, but he did not care. The terrifying reality of federal prison had completely broken his arrogant mind. He looked up at me, his face contorted in sheer panic, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Olivia, please," Greg wailed, his voice cracking with hysterical desperation. His grip tightened, smearing mud across my shoes. "You are a multimillionaire. We saw the presentation. We know you have the money. Just pay them back. Give them the $200,000 so they do not press charges." I stared down at him, my expression entirely devoid of sympathy. The sheer audacity of his request was staggering. After decades of emotional abuse, after publicly erasing my existence, and after getting caught attempting to extort a federal judge, his immediate instinct was to demand that I open my checkbook to shield him from the consequences of his own criminal actions. "We share the same blood," he sobbed, burying his face against my legs, completely abandoning any remaining shred of human dignity. "You cannot let your own father go to federal prison. I will not survive it, Olivia. I am too old. I will die in there. Just write the check. It is nothing to you now. Just pocket change. Please, I am begging you. Save your family." Brenda, witnessing her husband completely unravel, suddenly snapped out of her paralyzed shock. She lunged forward, dropping to her knees right beside him in the gravel. She grabbed my hand, her grip bruising and frantic. "Listen to your father!" Brenda screeched, her voice shrill and demanding, reverting instantly to her old authoritative tone, even while groveling in the dirt. "You owe us this. We gave you life. We raised you. You have millions of dollars sitting in a bank account while your sister is suffering on the ground. Do not be so selfish, Olivia. Pay the restitution right now and fix this. If you do this for us, we can forget everything that happened today. We can be a real family again. We will welcome you back." They were bargaining with counterfeit chips. Even now, cornered by the devastating consequences of their own spectacular greed, they genuinely believed they could manipulate me. They thought offering me the hollow conditional acceptance I had craved as a child would be enough to make me blindly empty my bank account to rescue them from felony wire fraud charges. They thought the old dynamics still applied, utterly blind to the fact that I was no longer the weak, desperate child they could control. I was the architect of their downfall, and I was going to enjoy every single second of their total destruction. I physically pried Brenda's clutching fingers off my wrist, letting her hand drop back into the mud. Then I took a deliberate, forceful step backward, pulling my shoes out of Greg's desperate grasp. I looked down at the man who had thrown me out of his house for choosing my own path, the man who had deemed my ambitions worthless and humiliating. "I am just a cleaner, remember?" I asked, my voice chillingly calm, echoing loudly in the quiet space left by the stunned crowd. "My money comes from scrubbing toilets. It is far too dirty to save the pristine high society reputation of this prestigious family." Greg choked on a sob, shaking his head frantically. No, we were wrong. We admit it. We were wrong. You were not just wrong, I corrected, my tone dropping to a sharp, unforgiving whisper. You were malicious. You told everyone I was dead because my honest labor did not fit your fragile fake narrative of generational wealth. You stole money from a sitting federal judge to fund plastic surgery and an extravagant wedding you could not actually afford. You built a house of cards out of lies, and now it has collapsed directly on top of you. I stepped further away, putting a safe distance between myself and their toxicity. Blood does not entitle you to my bank account, Greg. Blood does not grant you amnesty from federal wire fraud. You made your choices and you committed your crimes with absolute arrogance, believing you were untouchable. Now you finally get to experience the harsh reality of severe legal consequences. I am not your ATM, I am not your savior, and I am certainly not your family. You erased me from your lives completely. I am simply returning the favor permanently. I turned my back on my biological family, refusing to watch them writhe in the dirt for another second. The heavy, polished door of the black SUV was already open, held by one of Carter's security personnel. I stepped inside the quiet, climate-controlled cabin, leaving the oppressive humidity and the stench of their desperation outside. Carter climbed into the front passenger seat and gave the driver a single nod. The engine purred to life. As the heavy, armored motorcade slowly pulled away from the grand entrance, I looked out through the dark-tinted windows. The 300 elite wedding guests had completely vanished. The wealthy politicians, renowned surgeons, and prominent socialites had scattered like frightened insects, sprinting to their luxury cars to flee the scene before they could be associated with a federal crime. The manicured lawn was entirely deserted, save for the three miserable figures of Greg, Brenda, and Brittany huddled together in the muddy gravel. The sound of police sirens pierced the afternoon air. The wailing noise grew rapidly louder, echoing violently through the towering iron gates of the estate, coming to collect the trash. The game was officially over. I had won. 3 months passed since the disastrous wedding day at the Astor estate. The crushing weight of the American justice system does not move swiftly, but when it finally drops, the impact is absolute. Judge Yvonne Thornton was a woman of her word. She did not simply brush off the attempted extortion as a mere societal faux pas. She treated it as the federal offense it was. Within 48 hours of the canceled wedding, she formally submitted the digital dossier Carter had prepared directly to the Financial Crimes Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The immediate fallout was devastating and entirely inescapable. Greg had spent decades constructing a fragile empire built on aggressive accounting, delayed payments, and aggressive posturing. He believed he was a master manipulator, capable of outsmarting the system forever. He was entirely wrong. The investigation into the fraudulent Astor Events Management LLC triggered a massive, unavoidable chain reaction. Once federal agents secured warrants for Greg's banking records, they discovered the $200,000 attempted theft was just the tip of a deeply rotting iceberg. The Internal Revenue Service immediately joined the fray, initiating a comprehensive forensic audit of his primary manufacturing business. They systematically dismantled his entire financial history. The joint federal audit revealed years of grotesque financial mismanagement. Greg had been quietly embezzling corporate funds to sustain Brenda's exorbitant lifestyle, funneling money through dummy corporations and offshore accounts to evade taxes. He had falsified expense reports, inflated vendor invoices, and committed systemic money laundering on a massive scale. The federal agents seized his servers, froze his operational accounts, and locked the doors of his corporate headquarters. His employees were sent home indefinitely. His remaining clients immediately terminated their contracts, fleeing the toxic fallout of the investigation to protect their own reputations. He lost his entire business overnight. The indictment came down on a rainy Tuesday morning. Greg was officially charged with multiple counts of felony wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. The local news stations broadcasted the footage of Greg being escorted out of a federal courthouse in handcuffs. He looked pale, shrunken, and entirely broken. His arrogant swagger was completely gone, replaced by the terrifying realization that he was facing up to 20 years in federal prison. There was no negotiating, no bribing, and no manipulating his way out of a federal indictment handed down by the United States Department of Justice. He was completely trapped inside his own lies. He was forced to surrender his passport and wear a GPS ankle monitor while awaiting trial. The high society friends they had spent decades trying to impress immediately cut all ties. The Wilsons became toxic pariahs in Atlanta overnight. Every phone call they made went straight to voicemail. Every desperate favor they asked was swiftly denied. The isolation was profound and merciless, a perfectly fitting punishment for the cruelty they had inflicted on me. The fortress of lies they meticulously built had collapsed, leaving them exposed, disgraced, and facing absolute ruin. To secure Greg's release on bail and retain a high-powered criminal defense attorney, Brenda was forced to face the ultimate humiliation. The court demanded a massive financial retainer, and with all of Greg's corporate assets frozen by the federal government, they had no liquid cash available. Brenda had to put the family estate on the market immediately. Desperation drove the asking price down. The sprawling, luxurious home she had used as a status symbol to belittle others was sold at a massive loss to an aggressive real estate developer who intended to bulldoze the entire property to the ground. Brenda had to completely liquidate everything. Her designer wardrobe, her extensive collection of diamond jewelry, and the luxury imported vehicles were all auctioned off to cover the mounting legal fees. The transition from high society matron to absolute poverty was swift and brutal. With their credit scores destroyed and their bank accounts empty, no reputable landlord in the city would approve their rental application. They were systematically rejected from every decent neighborhood in Atlanta. Left with absolutely no other viable options, Brenda and Greg were forced to move into a cramped, dilapidated mobile home located in a rundown trailer park on the far outskirts of the city. The sheer irony was spectacular. It was the exact type of lower-class living environment Brenda had spent her entire life relentlessly mocking. Now she was forced to sleep in a damp, uninsulated tin box with peeling linoleum floors and a leaking roof. Her new neighbors were the very working-class people she used to sneer at, and they offered her no sympathy. The woman who had once demanded pristine perfection and absolute luxury was now trapped in a squalid, claustrophobic nightmare of her own making, completely stripped of her unearned arrogance and forced to survive in poverty. Meanwhile, Brittany refused to accept defeat gracefully. Desperate to salvage her shattered reputation and monetize her humiliation, she turned to social media. She sat in the cramped trailer park, angled her camera to hide the cheap wood paneling, and posted a tearful, highly edited video. She sobbed directly into the lens, claiming she was severely bullied at the altar and framed by a jealous, vindictive sister who maliciously destroyed her perfect wedding day. The video briefly gained traction, gathering sympathetic comments from gullible strangers who bought her pathetic, fabricated victimhood. But her digital resurrection was instantly obliterated. Donovan's family, fiercely protective of their immaculate reputation, refused to tolerate her public lies. Judge Yvonne Thornton's legal team released a polite but legally devastating cease and desist letter directly to the press and published it online. The pristine document outlined the exact details of the wire fraud, the credit card theft, and explicitly mentioned the active federal investigation. The public backlash was immediate and ruthless. Brittany's comment section flooded with intense mockery and sheer disgust. She was permanently exposed as a manipulative fraud, completely silenced by the undeniable truth, leaving her entirely alone in the trailer park she despised. The cease and desist letter from Judge Yvonne Thornton's legal team was a digital execution. Within 24 hours, Brittany's desperate attempt to manipulate the narrative backfired with apocalyptic force. The internet, always hungry for a villain, seized upon the undeniable proof of her extortion with ruthless efficiency. True crime podcasters, gossip vloggers, and millions of social media users dissected every single word of the judge's legal document, creating viral videos exposing her lies. They dubbed her the Scammer Bride, and the moniker stuck like a permanent ruinous stain. Her follower count plummeted. The comment sections on her carefully curated Instagram posts became a relentless barrage of mockery and disgust. People flooded her pages with photos of handcuffs and prison bars. The few boutique fashion and lifestyle brands that sponsored her content severed their contracts, immediately terrified of the toxic association. Britney's primary source of income evaporated overnight, but the professional devastation was even worse. Atlanta's elite event planning industry operates on absolute reputation and strict discretion. Britney was now synonymous with a highly publicized federal wire fraud investigation. Venue managers refused to take her calls. Renowned caterers and florists blacklisted her name from their vendor databases. Even budget brides planning simple backyard ceremonies wanted absolutely nothing to do with a woman who had tried to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from her own family. Her boutique planning agency, which was already hemorrhaging money before the wedding disaster, completely flatlined within a week, leaving her clients stranded. With absolutely no income generating the massive suffocating debt she had accumulated to fund her extensive plastic surgery and designer wardrobe came due all at once. Collection agencies sent aggressive letters daily threatening further legal action. The illusion of her success was entirely stripped away, exposing the pathetic reality that she owned absolutely nothing. Creditors began calling the rundown trailer she now shared with our disgraced parents incessantly. Her platinum credit cards were declined, then aggressively canceled by the banks. The luxury leasing companies repossessed her white Range Rover right out of the muddy trailer park driveway, leaving her standing in the dirt crying as her last physical symbol of high status was towed away into the dark night. Britney was forced to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, a humiliating, highly public legal process that completely liquidated whatever meager assets she had managed to hide. The golden child, who had spent her entire life believing she was destined for high society royalty, was now officially penniless, totally unemployable, and nationally disgraced. She was trapped in the exact squalor our mother had raised her to despise, completely dependent on whatever loose change Brenda could scrape together from the muddy floor. Desperation forced Britney into the lowest tier of the labor market. Stripped of her degrees, her professional reputation, and her unearned arrogance, she had to take the very first job willing to hire someone associated with a major financial scandal. She became a night shift cashier at a local 24-hour discount store located right off the highway, a place she previously would not have even driven past. The transition was a brutal, physically exhausting nightmare. Instead of wearing custom-tailored silk and sipping imported champagne at networking events, Britney was forced to wear a stiff, scratchy polyester uniform vest. She had to stand on her feet under harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights for 9 grueling hours a night. Her perfectly manicured hands became calloused, cracked and dry from breaking down heavy cardboard boxes, sweeping dirty aisles and handling crumpled cash from strangers. One rainy Tuesday, at 3 a.m, the store was eerily quiet. A tired-looking customer approached Britney's register, placing a red plastic shopping basket on the moving conveyor belt. Britney mechanically scanned the items: a cheap green sponge, a pair of thick yellow rubber gloves, and a heavy industrial-sized jug of liquid bleach. Britney grabbed the handle of the bleach, the cold plastic jarring against her skin. The scanner beeped loudly, breaking the silence of the empty store. She stared down at the harsh chemical warning label, and the absolute crushing irony of her fate hit her like a physical blow to the stomach. For years, she and Brenda had relentlessly mocked me, treating me like subhuman garbage, simply because I built my wealth by running a commercial cleaning company. They had laughed at my scrubbing brushes and chemicals, thoroughly convinced they were vastly superior. Now she was ringing up those exact same supplies for minimum wage, barely surviving on the poverty line. Her chest heaved. Right there at Register 4, clutching the heavy bottle of bleach, Britney broke down. Hot, humiliated tears spilled over her cheeks, dripping onto the cheap linoleum floor as she wept uncontrollably for the glamorous, wealthy life she had permanently destroyed by her own unbridled greed. While Britney drowned in the bitter, unavoidable consequences of her own malice, my reality continued to ascend into the stratosphere. I was sitting comfortably at the polished mahogany desk in my expansive corner office, reviewing the quarterly expansion reports for my commercial cleaning empire. The business had recently doubled in valuation, securing massive, highly lucrative federal contracts across the entire East Coast. My executive assistant knocked softly, stepping into the room, to hand me a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a distinctive gold wax crest. It had been hand-delivered by a private courier. I broke the wax and pulled out the heavy letterpress cardstock. It was a formal, highly coveted invitation to the annual Atlanta Justice Foundation Gala, the absolute most exclusive high society charity event of the season. I read the elegantly printed text, my lips curving into a victorious smile. I was not being invited as a vendor, a cleaner, or a +1. I was being honored as a VIP guest. And the name printed at the very top of the invitation, the esteemed host of the gala, who had personally requested my presence at her table, was Judge Yvonne Thornton. The Atlanta Justice Foundation Gala was a masterclass in understated elegance, a stark contrast to the gaudy, over-leveraged spectacles my biological family used to throw. I arrived in a custom emerald green silk gown, stepping into the grand ballroom of the Biltmore Hotel. The room buzzed with the city's genuine elite philanthropists, legal minds, and industry titans. I did not have to pretend to belong here. My success had already reserved my seat. As I navigated through the crowd of tailored tuxedos and glittering evening wear, the crowd parted, and Judge Yvonne Thornton approached me. She looked radiant, radiating the same uncompromising authority that had brought Greg and Brenda to their knees. But tonight her dark eyes were filled with profound warmth. She reached out and pulled me into a genuine, tight embrace. "Olivia," Yvonne said, her voice carrying a deep maternal pride that I had never experienced in my own home. "I am so incredibly glad you came." We walked together toward the main stage as the evening's program began. Yvonne took the microphone, the room instantly falling into a respectful silence. She spoke eloquently about justice, not just in the courtroom, but in our personal lives. Then she gestured for me to join her at the podium. Together we announced the launch of the Phoenix Initiative. It was a joint philanthropic venture, a multi-million-dollar fund, fully backed by my company, and managed by Yvonne's legal trust. Its sole mission was to provide elite legal representation and financial recovery resources for young women who had been financially abused, exploited, or defrauded by their own parents. The applause was deafening. It was a standing ovation from the most powerful people in the state, validating a mission born from my own painful history. As I stepped down from the stage, Donovan Thornton intercepted me. He looked sharp in a classic black tuxedo, the tension and betrayal of his canceled wedding completely erased from his features. He held out 2 flutes of champagne, offering me one with a sincere, grateful smile. "I never properly thanked you," Donovan said, clinking his glass against mine. "You did not just expose a fraud, Olivia. You saved my life. You saved my entire future from being chained to a parasitic family. I owe you a debt I can never repay." I smiled, taking a sip of the crisp champagne. "You do not owe me anything, Donovan. The truth simply revealed itself." He shook his head, his expression earnest. "Still, I want to introduce you to some people. My firm works with a group of commercial real estate investors who are desperately looking for a massive, reliable facilities management contract across their entire East Coast portfolio. I told them you were the exact person for the job." He guided me toward a group of influential executives, seamlessly integrating me into a network that would multiply my empire tenfold. Later that night, I stood on the sprawling glass balcony of my downtown penthouse, the cool night breeze washing over me. I held a glass of vintage red wine, looking out over the glittering, sprawling grid of the Atlanta skyline. The city lights stretched out endlessly, a sparkling testament to everything I had built from absolutely nothing. I took a slow, deliberate sip of the wine, letting the profound silence of my sanctuary wrap around me. I reflected on the grueling, painful journey that had brought me to this exact moment. I thought about the relentless years of being treated like an embarrassing secret, the constant belittling, the harsh, unforgiving smell of industrial bleach that had once defined my exhausting days. I had not sought revenge by screaming, throwing tantrums, or engaging in the toxic, dramatic mudslinging that my family thrived on. I did not have to lower myself to their pathetic level. I simply stepped aside and let the uncompromising legal and financial reality of the real world crush their manufactured illusions. I let their own boundless greed dig their graves, and I let their sheer arrogance push them right over the edge. They had demanded a seat at the highest table, completely oblivious to the fact that they could never afford the bill. I had won because I focused on building my own reality rather than destroying theirs. My success was a fortress they could never breach, a towering empire constructed on a foundation of honest, grueling labor and undeniable integrity. They were currently sleeping in a damp, decaying trailer park, suffocating under the weight of federal indictments and minimum wage misery. While I was breathing the crisp, clean air of the penthouse they had once told me I was too worthless to ever see. The contrast was not just poetic, it was absolute justice. I turned away from the breathtaking view of the city and looked directly forward, speaking not just to myself, but to anyone who has ever been made to feel utterly worthless by the people who were supposed to protect them. The absolute most satisfying revenge in this world is not tearing someone else down. It is simply stepping back, letting them drown in the bitter consequences of their own toxic greed while you quietly build an untouchable empire they can never reach. Biology is nothing but a genetic accident. Blood makes you related, but unwavering loyalty, genuine respect, and absolute honesty are what actually make you family. You do not owe your success, your peace, or your bank account to the people who consistently tried to destroy you. Have you ever had to permanently cut ties with toxic relatives in order to protect your own peace and build your own future? How did you find the courage to finally walk away and choose yourself? Did you struggle with the guilt, or did you immediately feel the profound relief of freedom? Tell me your story in the comments below.